Good morning, everyone. How we doing today? So, hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving. Curious, did anybody go out Black Friday shopping? I avoid the malls at all costs on Black Friday. No, thank you. But as we start the day, looking at the financial news of the day, it is clear that China's leadership not very happy with the U.S. today, or I guess I read this yesterday. They've threatened retaliation, I guess, for this signing by our government about Hong Kong. And again, I think I said yesterday, even the day before, that this is to be expected. There was no way that they were going to kind of take that and not do anything with it. That said, not really anything is clear as of yet. Could they disrupt things? Absolutely. However, if you kind of look at the underlying data, what's going on in their economy, the chances that they kind of use this to blow up, phase one trade war is unlikely. To that impact, it looks like China eked out a growth again, if you believe their numbers, which is always argument about how good their numbers are. But it eked out a 50.2. Anything over 50 is expansion. And one sec, sorry. I'm going to sneeze, I think. Anyways, but really what they're highlighting is they can't spark household consumption because food prices are rising and it's inflation. And again, they can't really consume when they have to buy their food. So that is going on. In addition to that, we have already a record being reported today for Black Friday. Looks like $5.4 billion in retail sales were done online yesterday, which is just crazy. Again, this just goes to show us the consumers are fine. Now, I suspect a lot of this is on credit or debt, so we could just be building a bridge to nowhere. But when you look into 2020 and you still see consumers spending at record levels, it tells you that unemployment sub 4, low borrowing costs, and shoppers going to shop. People are going to spend. So that is going on. I am curious what happened. Warren Buffett, I think I talked about yesterday, lost out on a bidding war by $100 million to private equity. I forget the company. I think it was Tech Data, but I don't remember. But I find myself asking a question. What does it mean that Warren Buffett didn't raise his bid? Right? He's sitting on $128 million in cash. And his sole job with that is to put it to work. And it looks like he identified a business he wanted and then got outbid by 1% or so. I just wonder what that means, right? He is obviously conservative. He's been doing this a long time. He obviously doesn't like bidding wars. But I'm wondering what that means, right? I just don't know, right? $5 billion to add a business. And what is that? $128 billion in cash. That's like 3.5% of the money that he has. So just interesting. He's quoted as saying there's very little cheap in the market right now. And I find myself saying that about real estate as well. I think real estate is rather expensive today in most markets. So, is sitting on cash the right answer? I don't know. Next up, it looks like the pot stocks, or really CBD companies, just got hit by FDA with some significant warnings. What I read in the article was FDA saying it can cause liver damage and other harm. And then later in the article, it basically says lack of research needs to be done. So I know there's after cryptocurrency, there was a big run to pot stocks. It looks like the FDA has put a kibosh on some of that future growth. So interesting. Again, I don't do stocks. Next up, I have a question for you. The Santa Claus rally, right? Basically a rally into the year end. I think it frankly has already started with the nice finish to November. And I'm curious what you think. Do we continue to melt up again because all that bad news from October is kind of behind us, or what happens? So I'm just curious. Next thing is, looks like companies have issued a record $2.43 trillion in corporate debt. That's a big number. it's basically being consumed because the Fed's T-bills and Treasury bills are so low that people are flocking to corporate debt for the higher returns. And this caused me to go back and look up something from the 80s. I don't know if you know this gentleman, Michael Milken. He was basically called the junk bond king, right? Think high interest rate back in the 80s. He actually went to jail in 89, I think. He worked for a company that no longer exists called Drexel Burnham Lambert. And the reason I wanted to look this up is because I remember corporate debt, specifically high rate or high interest rate debt, junk bonds, being the thing people were addicted to in the late 80s, at least in the Wall Street. In companies like KKR and these other companies were using these guarantees to buy companies and basically bid them up. I remember that at the time, Philip Morris, I believe, was bought during this time. So I'm just wondering if the cheap debt is going to take us there again. And because cash is not worth anything, if we're going to have bidding wars with debt again. I don't think it's happening really yet, but it's something I see coming. Next up, looks like November was a great month for acquisitions. It must be because I think we talked about it 4 or 5 times. Looks like $70 billion in acquisitions, led by Charles Schwab buying TD Ameritrade for $26 billion. Next up, looks like China. I already talked about the PMI number eking out, 50.2. But in the same article, they talked about they're issuing $1 trillion to local governments for infrastructure, roads, waterways, etc. Again, they're trying to spark internal consumption to combat the impacts of trade war and the like. So lots of stuff going on. And I guess the last thing to talk about, it looks like Bitcoin. I don't follow Bitcoin. I know I have a buddy of mine who's into cryptocurrencies big time. But I saw it was at a 6-month low in one of the article headlines I saw. I'm just curious, anybody who watches this real estate channel invest in Bitcoin or own Bitcoin? Just curious. I don't know. I do not, but I'm just curious if anybody watching this channel owns any Bitcoin. So that's what I have going on. The consumer's fine. Record Black Friday sales. Looks like China did what I said they were going to do. They threaten us. We'll see what happens. And then again, I am concerned about 2 things. Warren Buffett getting outbid and not raising his stake. I just wonder what that means. And then all this corporate debt reminds me of what happened in the 80s. So look it up if you don't know what I'm talking to. Oh, you got some Bitcoin. Okay, cool. Awesome. So again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Michael Milken, just go check out all the deals that were done in the 80s with junk bonds. And it's enough to at least ask ourselves some questions. Because I think I can see the chessboard moving that direction in 2020, maybe 21. It'll be a long process. But if cash continues to stay near worthless, you can see how people get addicted to debt and go on a shopping spree. So at the end of the day, that's what I got for you. Have fun, take care, and we will talk to you tomorrow.